were meeting with the district attorney's office initially when we all agreed that manslaughter was the appropriate charge. And he just said this is the rare case where the character of the accused is better than the character and higher than the character of the person who was killed. And I certainly agreed with him on that. And so that was a part of the mindset of leading us to believe that manslaughter was the more appropriate charge to start the case with, as opposed to second-degree murder.
The state offered to let him plead to manslaughter straight up without this sentencing enhancement to 20 years. We asked him whether or not he wanted to take it. He said, well, I get to tell my story. We said, well, there'll be a sentencing hearing, but no, it won't be a trial. And he said, no, I don't want to do that. He goes, if I can tell my story, if that jury determines that I need to go to jail, then that's fine, and I'll accept that. But I don't want to plead guilty and be sentenced by Judge Davis.
We really had a lot of conversations about me testifying. I just wanted to let them know the whys, you know, just why would somebody wind up in a position like this as far as testifying. I wanted to.
Woodrow is just the classic example of a man's man. I mean, he's just a stand-up, honorable man, hard-working man, works with his hands. He wasn't afraid of going to trial. He sure wasn't afraid of going to jail. He had already spent two and a half years in jail, but he had no fear whatsoever in going to trial. He just wanted the truth to come out, and he said that I can live with the result. And it just makes your job as an attorney that much easier when you have a client like that, who all he wants you to do is just give it your best, and he's going to live with the results.
And I remember when we offered him that plea, that's why I was so relieved, because I thought, I gotta almost recommend he takes this. Yeah. And Woodrow didn't give it a moment's consideration. And that would just relieve a ton of pressure, because you didn't even have to really advise him. He was just like, no, we're not gonna do that. And that was just, what was supposed to be an hour-long discussion was about a 2-minute discussion with Woodrow.
So this case was different from others just because there was so much involved. Like I said, going through the cell phones was a big part of the case, especially going through the alleged victim's cell phone, because, I mean, he just had so much text messages, calls, internet searches. It was just a lot of information to go through. We just had a lot of discovery in this case. I'm pretty sure we made a list of all our witnesses and split them up between the two firms, because we just had so many. We had an evidence list and an issue list. And basically any issue, whether it be any evidence at all, testimony, a physical item of evidence, a copy of a check, a tithe check from Woodrow, we had an entire exhibit list. Any testimony that we thought was important included in that exhibit list, and any potential issue that would come up in the trial that we thought would be of any significance at all. Todd had us line out basically every single one of those issues in one document, which is a remarkable amount of work, and then lay out the evidence argument that we believe the state would raise when we went to introduce it, and then our argument, to defeat that argument ahead of time, so that with respect to every single major piece of evidence in the case, we would already be absolutely prepared to rebut every single evidence argument that they made prior to trial. I've never done that on a case as extensively. I don't think a lot of lawyers probably do that, but we did it on this case, and it paid rich dividends.
But it's because of the judge we had. I mean, he's a slave to the law. He doesn't care about emotion, he doesn't care about politics. Tell me what the law is. And so knowing that we had Judge Davis as the judge, every critical piece of evidence, whether it was testimony, whether it was a canceled check, whether it was a for sale sign, whether it was photos of Woody's house comparing photos of Harris's house, we wanted to anticipate the state's objection, and we wanted to have succinctly stated the law, so when they object, we can give Judge Davis the code or article that applies, and we can move on, because we just felt like we had so much at stake, and we had such a good client to work for.
Meeting with Mr. Woody and Ms. Janet, you really can get the sense to see that everything is not what it seems, and it really just made me, and I believe all of us, want to work as hard as we can to show their story and give their story and help them out.
One of the pieces of evidence that we found was this incident from March 27, 2011. Woodrow and Janet had left Tabernacle of Praise or Calvary Pentecostal Church. They had left the church. They were going to another church, and but the pastor was still harassing her and doing all sorts of bad stuff. And so Janet's delivering on March 27th. She's delivering plate lunches to some people that are in need, live in apartments. They're elder people who can't get out, which is par for the course for this family. And The pastor sees her, and he's following her at the time, gets out and he starts assaulting her. And 2 people leaving a subdivision called 911, and they're reporting it over 911. And so we found this 911 tape, and the 911 tape is so pure.
911, where's your emergency?
Yes, I'm on the corner of DeSoto and Royal. There was a man assaulting a woman. When I stopped to call 911, he took off, and she is standing in front of apartment 626 on the corner of DeSoto and Royal.
Okay, did he leave in a vehicle or on
Yeah,
foot?
he left in a white Suburban.
Okay, what about her? You say she's a black female?
He was following you? He was following her. Who is he? Ronald Harris.
And then we found the CAD call sheet. It says that the police officers located Pastor Harris, and they specifically advised him to stay away from Janet Karey. And that was on March 27, 2011. That was 2 years before the shooting happened. And we knew that that was gold. When we found that piece of evidence, I thought there's no way we can lose this case now.
Law enforcement actually does a forensic analysis of the phone, and they turn over all of that to the state, and the state in turn turns it over to us. And so we're going through those thousands of pages, reading the text messages, looking at internet searches to see what he was searching.
My very first thing that I did on Mr. Woody's case was I took the cell phone records of the alleged victim. This was days worth of work. I put in all his longitude and latitude coordinates into Google Earth and tracked his whereabouts in the 2 weeks prior to the incident occurring. And sure enough, I think it was a day, maybe 2 days before the shooting, he was actually miles within their home, and their home is way out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, they live, so he was actually lived on the other side of town, south of Lake Charles, and they lived way out north. I mean, it would take him some time.
Because the state's whole theory was Mrs. Karey was having an affair. Her husband found out, and so she fabricated this entire story about rape. And so that evidence kind of corroborated her story.
Right.
That, no, he was stalking me. I was not in this consensually.
The backdrop of all of this was the state, little did they know, had never filed a motion for discovery in the case. So, how they forgot to do that, I have no idea.
And I had Adam check that like triple, quadruple times because I just couldn't believe they didn't file a discovery motion.
We're allowed full discovery on their case, meaning we're allowed to look at every piece of evidence that they have. And they are allowed to not look at every single thing we have, but some things, especially things we intend to introduce at trial, they're allowed to look at those things so long as they file a motion for discovery.
In advance of trial.
In advance of trial, at any point in time prior to trial. Now, so usually what happens is we file our motion for discovery, and they respond with, here's all of our discovery, and by the way, here's our motion for discovery. It's basic stuff, but they never filed it. And part of the reason was because as soon as this case got going, we were hitting them with motions just about every day.
And they thought it was going to be a quick turnover. They never foresaw this case going to trial. They thought, okay, he killed him in front of 50 people. We'll walk him in, plead him to manslaughter, we all go home. But they were in for a rude awakening.
That's exactly right. So we, in terms of our trial prep, we held back on certain things that we thought would alert them that they hadn't filed a motion for discovery. One of the Woodrow and them's prayers from the get-go, which directly ties into this, is that the Lord would use the prosecution to benefit the defense. And when you look at them not filing a motion for discovery, or at no point prior to trial, them recognizing that they didn't file a motion for discovery.
Yeah, they had tunnel vision from the beginning.
And that was the answer to Woodrow's prayer, that they would do things, the prosecutor would do things that would help the defense, and that was a big help to the defense.